All right, Jessica, we're back for part two. Part two. We had a great first conversation. How you been?
Yeah, I've been very good. I was kind of looking forward for this conversation again. I know we had to reschedule a few
Yeah,
times, but everything happens on the right timing.
for
So,
sure.
yeah,
Actually, since we last talked, I guess there was the very big psychedelic conference out here in Colorado where I live now. I
yeah,
did
yeah,
not
that's true.
go, but I was moving right when it was happening. Did you attend that, or how did that go?
I didn't go. For me, this was quite unaffordable actually
Oh,
to
I
come out
see.
of the way from the Netherlands to go to the MAPS conference, like the
Yeah,
flights and accommodation.
for sure.
Yeah, it was a little bit difficult. So I hope the next one I can attend.
So, were you able to talk to some colleagues, people about their experiences there? And if so, I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe your takeaway from their experiences or just people you've chatted with about it.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. We did have a few women from our team on Women on Psychedelics who could attend the conference because they are based in the US or in Canada, so that was much easier for
Great.
them. And the overall impression from their experience, it was that it was very emotional because
Mm,
it was a really long time that a conference in this scale less happened, and also the time in history that we are right now to actually have all these people gathering, all these people that are really passionate about this work and bringing psychedelics into the world. um, so I think, yeah, I really wish I could have been there. In the other hand, like I do have, yeah, this yeah, concerns in terms of like what they really did, yeah, related to accessibility and who were the people that were actually there. I did hear a few things regarding indigenous representation
hmm.
and of people of color as well. The same things we
Same
hear
things.
over
Yeah.
and over again, which is a little bit frustrating, but not a surprise. Um, but I think, like in any case, I really appreciate the efforts of MAPS on bringing all these people together and people flying from all over the world to
Yeah.
be there. And I think this by itself, like, is the start of like a really big change that can happen within the next few years. A lot has changed in the last couple of years,
Yeah.
right, already. So I'm really curious to see, yeah, what fruits and what connections arise during the conference that are going to bring up, yeah, good things for the psychedelic space.
Yeah. I know so many people who were there. I wish I could have gone. I was literally moving from
I
Washington
remember
State,
that.
right?
Hmm.
I mean, I was literally got here and it was just starting, and I was like, man, when you move, it's crazy. It's just you have so much going on. It's so exhausting. But hopefully next year, I would love to. If it's, I mean, I think they're based out here, Maps. So
Yeah,
it'd
yeah.
be nice to. For me, I'm a big networking person. I just like meeting people. I'm
Hmm.
not in the space, but I'm curious about the space, and so I think my first question here is kind of, since we've last spoke, what has changed? Has any of your outlooks or ideas about the industry changed since our last conversation?
Mm, yeah, I would say regarding a few things, but also this is very much related to my own personal
Okay.
professional path in this space. I'm currently in a period of my career that I'm starting to set up retreats here in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And it has been a very interesting time concerning that because we had Synthesis Institute. Remember the last time we
We were
spoke about
talking
it?
about synthesis and some big
Yeah,
changes, right?
yeah, exactly. So they kind of bankrupt, and
Yeah.
now there were a lot of different organizations popping up around here, bringing psilocybin retreats, and it has been interesting to see like how Beckley Institute has brought up their high end retreats towards the Netherlands as well, which are incredible. They seem to be like incredibly well thought, but they are also quite pricey.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like in that sense, I didn't see that much of a shift concerning the psychedelic space around here, but I feel in general like the same way that now I'm launching retreats with Dr. Wandrea Pennington,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the first retreats led by women of color in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
I do see that there are other places in other, you know, people that are bringing up some things, but like it has been quite slow, to be honest, to see the differences between when we spoke earlier this year up
Yeah.
until now. Yeah.
So it seems like retreats are becoming a bigger thing within this
Yeah.
space. Like why do you think it's that is seems to be a big growing space in
It
psychedelics?
is. It is still the most accessible model that we have, you know, in order for people to have this type of experience in a safe and legal
Yeah.
context with, you know, professional and qualified guides and therapists, and having access to the medicine, whatever medicine the person chooses to
Yeah.
take, in a way that is, you know, carefully, um, oh, how do I say? Uh, Chosen and picked from the environment in an ethical way.
Yeah.
And you know, like the medical model, even here in Europe, they are starting to look up in what ways they can, you know, roll this out with psilocybin, MDMA, or ketamine. But it's still quite expensive, and not everybody will fall into the category of like trying to access these medicines because they have a mental health condition. A
Yeah.
lot of people are also looking to have access to psychedelics for self development or personal transformation. And the retreat model really brings that up to people in a much easier way. There's more flexibility in terms of dates. It's a easier um, way of like being screened to take part on this type of experience. And there's a lot of good offers out there in different parts of the world, like Costa Rica, Guatemala, like places that are actually quite better weather than here, for example,
Yeah, yeah.
to go to.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So like even in my experience as well, like having the chance to attend a retreat is something really special, because I do think there is a big healing aspect of the psychedelic experience that only happens when you take it in a group context or in a more communal way. So
Yeah.
the retreats, they really give people that. They really give the chance for you to be there with others that's at times they are completely different from you. And other times you're going to find the similarities between each, you know, each person that is there. And you're going to find medicine in everyone who is there. It's interesting that even sometimes it plays out certain family dynamics that and
Yeah.
triggers that you can find in the retreat context. So I find that by itself it is quite healing, and it has quite a huge impact into the lives of the people that have the chance to attend to an experience like that.
So I'm curious, as I mean, as someone who's I'm not in the space, as I mentioned before, I'm curious, like, what's the viability financially for someone to be in this space to make this their living?
So like for people like me,
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. So um, it really depends of how I feel like it's your level of experience with working with the medicine, your level of like how much mentorship you got, how often did you have the chance to sit for other people, what are the connections and your network that will allow you, you know, to get into a certain stage in this career. I noticed that for me, for example, like the collaborations and the people that I have worked with are one of the main reasons why I am where I am today. It's not something that I actually got here by myself, but at the same time, I see how difficult it is for me, even in a country in which the truffles, psilocybin truffles, which are the medicine I work with, they are legal here. It
Right.
is still quite difficult to make a full time job out of this, and this is
Right.
also why I do part of my work is also the educational work. But it's mostly because at times you do have. If you are in the retreat line and you start to organize retreats quite regularly and they sell out, then you're good. But if you're working with private clients, it really depends on the stream of people that are coming here. And yeah, it kind of feel like we talked about it the last time. It kind of feel it's a bit like a freelancing job.
Yeah.
So I find we are not at the stage yet in which I could say this is something that everyone could quit their job and try, and they will definitely make a living out of it. I think for people who already have a good amount of money to invest in a project or in a retreat venue or anything like that, then it's different. But if you want to start from scratch and you want to, get some training and try to have a different set of skills to be a
Yeah.
guide, then it's kind of like a long, bumpy road.
Yeah. Now we did talk
Yeah.
about it, and I thought, man, I wanted to extend on that conversation because um, there is a lot of people. I think they have such a passionate feeling about the medicine
Mm.
substance, and they want to make this their job.
Mm.
And I just wonder, just on the outside looking in, is like, okay, how is that feasible? And what's the situation with companies, maybe like a Mind Bloom and things like that, that have like people work for them, and they're
Yeah.
integration therapists and stuff. And again, I don't know much about it, but there seems to be companies that they hire people to work in these spaces. What's the viability of those companies, and what's the future, and how, in terms of how would this become a full-time job for a lot of people in the future? What needs to happen for that to happen?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And I do have like some a bit strong opinions when it comes to that, because right now, like, if you pick the job of like an integration therapist or coach, being paid by companies like Mindbloom or others, they're not very well paid.
Mm,
Like the conditions, even, for people who offer 1 hour therapy or a 30-hour therapy online, like the rates that they get per hour are quite low
right.
for the work that they do right now. Also, even if you pick like in the context of people who work in the Amazon jungle on retreats and they need to be there on call 24/7, they need to be basically live there, right?
Oh, I see.
And dedicate their lives to the work. Oftentimes, it's also not, the compensation is not as much as you think it would be,
Mm,
uh, for a path that I feel at times it really gets quite mingled with, your personal life. You really walk the talk when
yeah.
you are working, yeah, with psychedelics in that way. So I see that, in certain some of these big companies or some of these big retreats, there is still not so much of like bringing the value to the people who are there, directly working with the people, directly
Yeah.
working with the medicine, and directly working on themselves. And I find, yeah, that's, I don't know how long it's going to take for that to change in this industry, because I still feel like there's a really big capitalistic mindset, that they are hiring people and they want to, tickle this amount of patients per hour, or per day
Yeah.
on calls, but not really giving the proper value to the person who took many years of studying that, or like who took many years of having experience with these medicines, or even in their own inner work. So I don't see this as something that is the ideal scenario right now, and that's why you can also see there are many cases not often spoke about of people that have emotional burnout, guides that have emotional burnout, because yeah, especially if they work and live in retreats in South America, it's really something that you just cannot pick yourself and get yourself out of that context
Yeah.
and go home after spending the whole day at the office,
Yeah.
but now you're immersed on that experience all the time. So
Hmm.
I think we need to actually bring, and this will sound, a bit ironic, because I think that's in general when it comes to people that work with mental health, is try to look a little bit deeper in the mental health of people who are working with mental health, and how can we support
Yeah.
the mental health of mental health providers,
The
and
mental
it's the
health of mental
same
health
thing.
providers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing in the psychedelic space, unfortunately. And yeah, I don't, it's not different here. So yeah.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
interesting that you're in a place where it's, you have a legal aspect to it and there's still a struggle, which I think
Mhm.
is a good reminder, especially in the United States, where there's a push to try to get that more nationally. You have it in
Yeah.
very few places, but that even if it did become more legal on a wide scale, it would still be hard.
Yeah,
It might still
exactly.
be hard, right?
Yeah, because it's also like, again, it's still a very recent field. It's the first time that, kind of like first time that we are all doing
Yeah.
this, and we are
Right.
kind of all learning on the go. But I find like it's really impressive. Like, even though we can daydream and think like, okay, this is a space where people are more conscious and we want to bring more consciousness to the world, we are
Yeah.
still repeating very often the same mistakes as, the whole rest of our system. So yeah.
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 It's interesting. Like I think of like in any industry, you have people are very passionate about what they do, and I'm watching this very closely because I think like when something is in its infancy, it's great. You have a pioneering aspect to it, right? It's the pioneers of something, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes when
Hmm.
you're a pioneer of something. What are the biggest mistakes in this pioneering adventure that you see that are happening?
I think definitely direction is more important than speed, and this is also
Mm.
something that is, this is the first mistake I would say that I see happening in many different ways, right? Like, one is like, really, if you have a company in this space not trying to make it grow super fast or have the biggest amount of profit, but really look from it step by step, and how can you guarantee that every step of what you are building and with whom you are building is healthy and sustainable, and it really embodies the values of, the medicine that you are trying to work with and what you are trying to bring to the world. This would be like one thing that I would say is like, um, major. And this is also why, one of the reasons why we see so many companies that already popped up in these last years and they already failed to work,
Yeah.
because this is not the mindset that was behind it. So that would be one thing. Mm, if I think about other mistakes, is also the exploitation of these
Mm.
medicines, and not only in terms of like, yeah, natural resources, but also like, where are they coming from and from who are they coming from, where these traditions come from. I feel like I am being a bit repetitive on saying that, but we need repetition because
Of course.
it's still not heard.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
I see that also, like, when it comes to, for example, if you think about 5-MeO DMT
Mhm.
and people using the substance coming from the toad, or if they have the option of using the substance coming from, synthetic means.
Synthetic, yeah.
Yeah, and that would sound like a much more reasonable choice for the intentions and also for the earth who is giving us, these medicines. But sometimes people still choose to go for the toad,
Right.
even though they know like the natural, like the huge impact that this is having on the community of those that species. So I think, like, yeah, that would be probably the second thing that I would say. It's a mistake because we have done that before. We have done
Yeah.
that with so many different things. If you, I can pick even like a quite an interesting example. If you pick the case of cocaine, which originally comes from coca leaves, and how this plant was a medicine itself for the people of that land for so many years, and how much that medicine was, exploited and destroyed
Right.
and transformed to become something that nowadays is so problematic in so many different, levels of social
Yeah.
impact of like uh, exploiting nature and also the community that is in there. This is something that it happened to coca leaves, but I don't see how it cannot happen to psilocybin or to ayahuasca. The way we relate to these medicines and the way we take them from the earth, what we do with them, how we scale them,
Oh, we scale them. Yeah.
it's really important. Otherwise, we are just repeating the same cycle, and then all the sacredness that is behind it becomes it's lost. So that would be, probably the second thing that I would say. It's one thing we need to pay really good attention to, because
Yeah.
it hasn't, in this past years, it has been a bit worry. How is that happening as well?
Right. I want to kind of go back to the conference element of what we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously this is pretty fresh. It was just happened, and relatively recently. And again, I'm not aware of like all the conferences. I know about this big one, but what are the other opportunities people have to go to conferences like this? Not just a huge one like the MAPS conference, but what else is available, and what should be the goal of these types of conferences in the psychedelic space?
Mm-hmm. We do have the Insights conference coming up, I think it's this month or September in Berlin,
Hmm.
Germany. I'm not attending to it. It's also quite expensive again, and it's really focused mostly on psychedelic science and people that work, you know, in research and all of that.
Yeah.
There's also the ICPR next year. The Breaking Convention in the UK just happened as well. And this I didn't attend, but this was one of the ones that I would definitely recommend to people, because it's not just about psychedelic science. It's really bringing like the medicine people, mysticism, and all the
Okay.
other beautiful things that like kind of go together with
Yeah.
what we're talking about. So I think, just in my personal opinion, then like if you're not a person who works in research, or who's not just interested, in the scientific aspects of things, I would then recommend conferences like Breaking Convention. I do think the MAPS conference also had conversations like that were, more broad.
Yeah.
But all the other conferences that I see around here, they're really focused. Yeah, they have a certain language and they are for a certain public.
Yeah.
And I do see efforts in some of them to bring different lenses. But I'm also, it's really curious to see what are the barriers in there. We cannot leave so much, science. Otherwise, it's not scientific anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this would be some of the ones that I would recommend.
Okay. It's interesting. I think you're talking about like the cost of these things, and in the fitness industry, we had one of our huge conferences, IDEA, recently in LA, in Los Angeles. And in a committee I was on, we had discussed about how we think that a lot of these conferences in our industry, but it sounds like yours too, is that we're actually hurting the access of people coming by making it too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think of the machine of these things. It's like, well, does it have to be that expensive? On the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, is the expense high because of the production of the event, or how much are you paying speakers? Or if you're getting very large personalities, big time people, are they demanding large payment to be at these things? I don't know. These are just questions I have. But I think if you
Mm-hmm.
want to have a larger movement, you have to make the pricing commensurate with what people are able to afford in the field who are actually working in it on a regular
I,
basis.
I completely agree with you. And at least, and I've seen some organizations doing that, and I really liked it. It's like providing a breakdown of the
Okay.
costs and why things, why the ticket cost has that price,
Right.
or how much it takes to build a conference like this. I've recently saw that it's not a conference, but it is also a big event that just happened. I came back from Boom Festival in Portugal,
Okay.
and they literally do a breakdown of everything, like how much takes to build their stages, how much takes to
Yeah.
have like their compost toilets, how much takes to bring the people there, the DJs and all of that, how much it takes, the drink that you're paying that price because part of that money goes to this and the other part is the profit that they
Yeah.
make. So if people have more clarity in these things, I think that also helps us understand where the money is going, where it's coming from. Do I invest my money on it? And what are the ways
Yeah.
that we can sometimes create different tiers of pricing so that the people that have more money, they can pay a little bit more. And then this gives the chance for somebody who has less money to go on a
Yeah.
scholarship. I've seen retreats here doing this, like the QME retreats, and I find that's an incredible model because
Yeah.
it really allows people that wouldn't, by other means have the opportunity to be there, to at least, have the chance to attend because there's still the travel costs, the accommodation,
Of
and all of that.
course.
So,
Of course.
yeah, it's unfortunately, yeah, it's not for everybody, and I don't know, yeah, how can that change anytime soon? But there are ways and there are models
There are ways.
in, yeah. So I
Yeah, I
think
have some
it's,
solutions. I think one of the biggest problem with most conferences, not just in my industry, is that there's too many speakers at these big conferences. And if you're going to
mm-hmm.
pay speakers to be at things, that's essentially like payroll. I think
Yeah.
the content needs to be condensed into stuff that really matters that people want versus just giving so many different options for
Mm-hmm.
people. I compare it to going to a restaurant. Like if I go to a restaurant and the menu's too big, I'm just not gonna I'm probably gonna get the same thing most of the time
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I know what I like. So I think there's just often in conferences way too many options, and you
Yeah.
need to cut down on the options, save your money in other places, have more connecting events that get people together.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
because most people go to conferences and stuff just to meet each other and to network and
Yeah.
chat with people. So spend your time on that and less time getting the biggest speakers, the biggest so and so there and stuff. I know that there's a value in that, but if it's cost prohibitive, then people just can't come and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I think sometimes you got to hurt yourself a little bit in order to make
Mm-hmm.
progress. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's just these are just my suggestions. Doesn't mean they're right. I just think I see it like a lot of my colleagues when they go to conferences, they don't even go to most of the presentations. They just go to meet people. I'm like, okay, that's a
Mm-hmm.
networking event. It doesn't have to have all the pomp and circumstance. If that's the case, maybe totally different in the psychedelic space. But a lot of
No, but it
conferences
makes
operate
sense.
similarly, though.
It makes a lot of sense to me, and I would even add to that, like, it's it's tiring to see the same big names all over
Yes.
and over again in all conferences, like
Yes.
uh, repeating pretty much the same things.
The
It's
same
much better
thing.
to give
Yes.
voice to those who are not in every conference but are doing some pretty cool work, and you get to know them if you give them the chance to be their speakers. There are some conferences and some summits in the US that they do that in the plant medicine space, and I think that's amazing. You can even like uh, they even give the chance to try to diversify the board of speakers a little bit more, because otherwise it's just the same white
Same people.
men and women that are always there. So I think, yeah, definitely there are ways. It's just like, is there intention to do in that way? So yeah, this is something that the psychedelic space can explore a little bit more of it.
Yeah, I'm all about like solutions and stuff, man. It's great to talk about it, but it's like, hey, how about try this? How about do that? Like, I know one of the things we're working on is like more ambassadorship. So in all the different states, let's have a few ambassadors in each state for
Hmm.
fitness, health, and wellness in these organizations. Again, I don't know how it works with psychedelics, but like, you got to unite the team,
Yeah.
and obviously this is a pretty global thing with it. But I'm a
Hmm.
big conference breakdown person. Like, tell me what the value of this is. Everything's a value proposition
Hmm.
for
Yeah,
it.
that's
And
true.
what's the value of someone spending a lot of money to go to something to, that honestly it's gonna break you personally.
Hmm.
And what
Hmm.
and maybe even it's not even that good in terms of the actual content, but it's great to meet people. All right, well, just change how it is then. Don't make it, it doesn't have to be gigantic. You don't have to rent the entire convention center for something.
Yeah.
Like make it better. I'm all about making stuff better.
Yeah, less is more. I
Less
truly
is
believe on
always
that.
more to me. But it's always a volume game. This the whole thing. It's the scalability of things. How can we scale this? How can I see that in the psychedelic space? How can we scale it? How can we make it bigger? How could these companies get in? But there should be restraint in growth, I think.
Hmm. Well, that's a thought that I have for everything else in this system. Just like why, yeah, things are collapsing, and like things are not working out anymore the way that they used to, because uh, forever growth is just
Yeah.
not something that is meant to be happening, especially when it comes to resources, or like, I don't know, people working nonstop, like trying to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I this is like, it's one of the ingrained values that we have in our society that
Sure.
really doesn't make sense, but
I
it's really on
know.
the heads of people, and we are repeating that in this space as well, in interesting ways.
Yeah, it's true. So I wonder, like, if you could make everything how you wanted it to be in the psychedelic space for the future of psychedelics, what would that be?
Oh, oh, wow, that's such a big question.
It sure is. It sure is.
uh, I would for sure give more opportunities of learning uh, and connecting and finding the elderly and the people that work with different medicines for many, many years, and giving them recognition, and, you know, giving them the space to give mentorship,
Hmm.
so that we learn, not only how to do this work, but like how to do this work in a conscious way. And I would also like try to imagine a space in which people would have more awareness regarding where their medicine comes from, uh, why they are actually doing that work. Is it coming from a place of like, I really want to bring this to the world because I believe this is something that can be really positive to the world, or is it coming from a different place? I feel as well like slow is better. So, in my ideal view of how the psychedelic space would grow, it would be slower,
Yeah.
more mindful, not focus on profit, because I don't think it's an industry that is made to give profit
Hmm.
to people. And more focus on the well being uh,
Right.
overall. So, yeah.
What
That
about?
doesn't fully answer the question
No,
because it's
no.
a
There's
big one, but
layers.
like there's so many
There's
layers.
there's layers to it, and I actually
Uh,
started thinking, like, as you started trailing off at the end, how would you? What would be your ideal way to approach legalization of it in different countries?
mm. Oh, that's such another very interesting question. I, my thoughts on that keep changing. I just mentioned to you, I returned last week from Portugal, from Boom Festival. And Portugal is a country in which they have the decriminalization of all drugs since many, many years now.
Yeah.
And not the legalization, but just the decriminalization, and being there in this context, that I could be in a festival in which you are not afraid to take drugs in public. They do provide harm reduction services of like checking your drugs
Yeah.
and psychological, psych care for people that are having challenging trips. Um, that was so profound to experience and to be in a country in which you have that freedom of like choosing to explore your consciousness and not feeling like you're going to be punished for it. So I feel like that if you pick Portugal and that example of decriminalization of drugs, this is one good way that I would say to start. in terms of legalization, we don't have that many examples, but this is a good example, and also how they did that from the beginning, to actually help reduce, the amount of people that were taking heroin and other harder
Yeah.
drugs, and it had a huge impact in their society and in the well-being of their people in general. That I it always like I come back from this trip now and I'm back in the Netherlands and I'm like, why is this not happening here?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like even the government, and like they could actually profit from it in other ways if that's the goal, right? But
Yeah.
like people would have more safe access to all things. It could have a return on investment to the government, for the cities. But yeah, I yeah, yeah, it still breaks my head a little bit on why
Yeah.
it's not like that. Yeah.
This is an interesting frontier we're
Mm-hmm.
tackling because even in America, there's places of like decriminalization, but probably not a lot of harm reduction programs or different programs put together to help coincide with that. It's like, well, we're not gonna prosecute this stuff. That's just kind of where
Mm.
we're at. There's no programs associated with, and those are usually very bad ways of going about it because then it's just a free for all type of thing.
Yeah, yeah, that doesn't
Um,
work either,
it
right?
doesn't
Like
work. No.
you need to have an actual, plan. So like really harm reduction services, I think, and education, ongoing educational of
Yeah.
responsible use overall is like these are pillars if you want to have, drugs decriminalized or legalized one day, and that
Yeah.
people know what they're taking, how they're taking, what's safe, what's not. It needs to be alongside those pillars.
Yeah. Most definitely. And you know what's an interesting question about freedom or a commentary about freedom because on one hand you may have some people who are all about freedom or body autonomy but then
Mm,
don't want people taking psychedelics or different drugs. But like wait a
mm.
minute, how is that a freedom conversation then?
Oh, that's a
Of,
good,
you
like,
know,
yeah, it's a conversation on psychedelic exceptionalism as well. So, like,
exceptionalism, yes.
yeah, thinking, yeah, psychedelics are better than all the other drugs. So I tend to not do that comparison so much. I think drugs are drugs,
Yeah.
point. Uh, some drugs give you certain things, other drugs give you different things. The way you relate to the drug, that's what matters. What is your intention while
Right.
you're taking it? What do you want to get from it? And
Yeah.
how balanced that is. So I don't separate like these are good, these are bad, because psychedelics can also be used in an abusive
Of
way, and they can
course.
also be pretty bad. Like they can be like quite tricky if you don't know what you're doing
Yeah.
when you're taking them. So the separation also, I don't think it's very helpful for what we're trying to do here in terms of like bringing that freedom
Yeah.
into like what I give to my body and how I give this to my body, because then you are again putting things in different boxes and you are marginalizing and like putting in a lower position people that are taking drugs that you don't think are good. But then you are isolating people again and you are perpetuating the same harms that have
Yeah.
been happening for many years. So I think there's a tricky perspective that I saw a lot of people in the psychedelic space having as well, of like, these are better, these are the only things that expand our
Yeah.
consciousness, which I don't think is the
Sure.
case. Yeah, so it's a
You know
juicy
what's it?
conversation.
It's a very juicy. You know how this is how this goes. You know, we're gonna have a very interesting, and you know, I always think that expansion of consciousness is an interesting conversation because I feel like I don't know this to be true. It's just an observation that there's forces at play that just don't want other people to experience enlightenment on some level.
Mm, mm,
And that when people, for lack of a better word, wake up to their own reality in a more loving, kind, warm way, some people don't like that that's happening to other people.
yeah,
And I don't think we talk about that part too. There's some forces that are against that. you know?
Yeah, there are many different forces. Like, yeah, some are in positions of power, but
Right.
others are also within each one of us, I think. And
Yeah.
the way we view ourselves in comparison to others.
Mm.
So I do think, like, yeah, we all have a little bit of that.
That's
But
juicy. What's the deal when you don't want to wake up to yourself, you know?
yeah, yeah. Also, like, I think also in all of this, it's still a mirror, right? Like the
Yeah.
way, yeah, we want to impose or like not allow certain experiences and certain things to happen to other people.
Yeah.
It's telling also a lot about us and what are
Yes.
our values, what are our beliefs, and what are our complex, I don't know, of superiority or inferiority at
Yeah.
times. So that's another big broad topic.
Huge. Because I feel like a lot of people who are very against psychedelics are against the transformation element of it. They're scared of becoming someone else. And I get that. I totally get that. It's like, well, what's on the other side of this for me? Because
Yeah.
I know for myself, I feel like psychedelics is one of the bigger things in life that there's like a you before and you after type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stuff is not like that. It's like, oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
just a day or whatever,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just kind of a moment. The psychedelics is definitely like a pre and post thing going on. I mean, you could
Yeah.
slide back into the pre thing too, but it's just kind of like I think people will get really scared of like, well, how will people relate to this maybe altered carbon version of me? And
Yeah.
that I am relating to a lot of things differently than I used to. And there's fear of rejection of this person you're becoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then it's also like, yeah, I have that happens to so many clients that come to me for private sessions as well of like, oh, am I going to be different after?
Yeah.
Am I not going to like my wife anymore or
Right.
something
Right.
like that?
Right.
But I think it's interesting to observe what is, yeah, the actual fear. And I think you touched
Yeah.
very well
Like,
in
what is
that.
that? Why do you think you
Yeah.
wouldn't like your wife anymore? It's like, what is, there's something else there. Like,
There's always something else. And the
yeah.
fear, there's always a, a lot of message behind the fear. And
Yes.
if you keep asking the fear what's really telling you, there are so many layers that you can unpeel from it. And one that you touched now when you talked is the fear of rejection, for example. And I think like that's a very valid, natural fear.
Yes.
The fear of change. That's a fear we all have. But there's so much on the other side of change. And
Yes.
there's also a part of you that is pulling you to that. So you're not stuck on the sameness because the
Yeah.
sameness is not bringing you what you want, and then you know
Yeah.
there is something more. Um, so I think like in overall, when it comes to psychedelics, there is a lot of fear still, and most of the fear also comes from different propaganda we had in the past,
Yeah.
or lack of education, or lack of knowledge of people of really knowing like what the substances are. And
Yeah.
honestly, they are not gonna show you anything new, and they're not gonna show you, you know, they might bring light and a lens to parts of you and to what and who you actually are,
Yeah.
rather than what and who you are not. So I think at times the fear might be to step into that
Yeah.
version of you, or like after you know that like when people work with psychedelics for an extended
Yeah.
period and with integration, there is the change, but you see that changes happens because you are peeling off the layers of everything that made you the person
Yeah.
that you are actually not. Like you are picking
Yeah.
up all the stuff that are stopping you from seeing your true essence, all the
Yeah.
conditioning, all the fears, and all the things that like make your mirror a little bit blurry. Yeah, so
All of this
that's how I
armor you
feel.
put on throughout the years that
Exactly.
tried to you that you maybe you put it on, other people put it on you. It's like, all right, let's just dig down to the core of this, you
The
know.
core of this, and that's scary. Like,
Yes,
that's fucking scary. I
I
get
totally agree.
it.
I totally agree. I mean, people like comfort, right? Humans love comfort. This
Hmm.
kind of inertia of comfort is very tied into our human condition. And
Hmm.
to take the leap to put something into motion
Yeah,
is very
exactly.
difficult. I mean, people like if you like I was just telling you, I just moved. If you
Hmm.
A lot of people want to move, but they don't want to actually move, like to do the work to move, right? This is like this desire to move and experience something new, but the work part is the problem.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so I think that's the work part, and having less control of things is, people like to control their environment.
But do they really?
Yeah. Interest
So it's
okay.
like
Okay,
it's
that's
maybe letting
interesting.
go of the idea that you actually have control over something,
That's
because that's
true.
also an illusion that we really like to hold on into. And
Mm.
I think, yeah, psychedelic work has a lot of like letting go
There's a lot of
of
letting
that.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Be like I have like a group of 3 or 4 friends. We're really tight, and three of us have had ceremony together, and it's been amazing. And one of our friends, he is just like very hesitant to do it,
Hmm.
and I think he's scared about what's the other side of this thing, and like, and that I just see that with some people. It's like, oh, there's this control aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like, I want
Yeah.
to control all aspects of my. Some people control different versions, whether it's finances, people they're around, the schools you go to, and some people just want to have ultimate say on everything. They want to be the boss of
Hmm.
everything. But I
Hmm.
think you find yourself when you lose yourself in many ways.
Oh, for sure. And the more control you put into things, the less freedom you actually have over things, which is
Ooh,
ironic.
ooh, ooh. That's something, right? The more.
Well, talking from the perspective of a person who has suffered with anxiety for many years, and
Hmm.
like as in the past in my life, how much I tried to crazily control everything around me, and like it's it's so crazy that that would just
Yeah,
spiral my anxiety even more, because I wouldn't
yeah,
be able to control things and outcomes the way I wanted to. So yeah, the less you try and the more you embrace the unknown, you embrace what is, and you embrace the whatever might come in life, the more you actually, yeah, are free
yeah.
in your life.
That's been an issue for me. I still struggle with that even after psychedelics. It's like kind of it's always been like a thing for me. But I actively definitely try to work on it and different things that I do, but it's very difficult to release yourself of that even after having several trips and integrating. Life is always coming at you. Like, life
Mm-hmm.
is not taking breaks ever. It's like I'm coming at you every day, you know.
Yeah, no, I get it. But one thing that I learned as well is maybe sometimes it's not about releasing and not being that way anymore, but just relating to it and
Yeah,
in a different way.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, if you don't need to fully let go of your relationship with control, but you can be more curious about it, and you can try to
Mm.
understand, oh, what is this? Where is this actually coming from?
Yeah.
And how can I make it a
Man.
little bit more softer and a little bit nicer for myself?
Yeah.
Or is this coming from a place of fear, and let me
Right.
understand that fear. So it's really, after years of working with psychedelics, I see that not necessarily all these negative aspects or traits of me have changed, but more that my way of relating to them has
Yeah.
changed, and therefore my way of relating to myself has changed as well. And I
Yeah.
think that's the medicine too.
Fantastic, man. I knew this was going to be good. It was so awesome last time we talked,
Yes, I know.
and I just like going there. And you're a very easy person to go there with on these things, Jessica. Thank you so
Oh,
much
thank you
for.
so much. Really,
Yeah,
thank
you're
you.
wonderful. Seriously, you're
You
just
too.
very easy. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a good flow. I feel like we can talk for a really long time, and it
Yeah,
didn't even
yeah.
feel like it passed already 50 minutes. Oh my God.
I know. It just kind of happens, right? It's just like get in the zone, and all of a sudden, it's
Yeah.
like all these questions here, and there's these thoughts, and I just really appreciate your willingness to go back and forth with me. about this
Oh,
stuff.
no. And thank you so much for your curiosity and for bringing me the juicy questions as well. I love,
It's
yeah,
right.
really enjoyed this
Always.
conversation.
Always. Please tell the wonderful folks again how they can connect with you and the work you're doing.
Yes, they can connect with me via my website, jessicalagarde.com, or they can find me on womenonpsychedelics.org as well. Yeah, both websites, they can see more of my educational work, of my private work in organizing retreats and ceremonies for, yeah, all people.
Perfect.
So that's it.
Jessica, thank you so much for your time and be in touch.
Thank you so much. See you next time.